everybody, to the Elad Pod. We have a special election special, and that's why we're on a special evening tonight. So we have David Tyson Smith here with us. He is running for House District 45, and for those of you who are watching the intro, you saw the map of that district, but we're going to make him describe it anyway. That is in the Boone County area, Columbia area, for those of you who do not know, but I'm sure he knows all of the borders, and he's right there right now anyway. So today, as we're talking, and right now, is so we can get more folks involved and asking questions and providing comment, go ahead and please, if you could, share the video wherever you're watching from. If you're watching on Facebook, that's real easy. Just push the share button. If you're on Twitter, you can retweet it. If you're on YouTube, heck, send it to a whole bunch of folks that you know. While you are watching, if you've got any questions or comments, ideas, whatever they might be, you can go ahead and write those right into the comment section. And if you don't want to do that, but you still want to provide a comment or question anyway, you can. For most of the show, a phone number will appear on the bottom of the screen. Text that number. Don't call it. I'm not picking up the phone in the middle of the show. But if you text it, I'll see the question, and we'll try to get that answered too live on the show. If you could also let us know where you're watching from. I know we've already got a comment from Teresa. She likes the music, and well, I chose it, so I kind of liked it too. But this is a good show. I'm very excited that we have David up here to talk about his race and his candidacy. So if you do have any questions just around what his policies are, but also about running in general and getting organized and doing this kind of work, please go ahead and put those in the comments too. All right, folks. So without any more delay, let's bring on our guest, see if he's still here. David, are you here?
I'm still here.
Wonderful. Well, welcome to the Elad Pod. Very excited to have you tonight. Like I mentioned in the intro, you're running for House District 45, state representative. That's very exciting. You know, unfortunately, a lot of folks in the state and really throughout the country don't really quite know about local government, right? We know about Congress, we know who's run for president, maybe we know who's, doing senator or governor or something, but oftentimes folks who are in our local government have the biggest impact on our day-to-day lives in terms of policy and rules and all of this stuff. So could you tell us a bit about, who you are, why you're running, and what the big ideas you have to bring to Missouri and to our local government?
Absolutely, and thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here, Elad. So about me, my name is David Tyson Smith. I grew up in Columbia, Missouri. I'm a product of the public schools. For those who know Columbia and the surrounding areas, I graduated from Hickman High School, Columbia Hickman High School. I went to the University of Missouri, graduated from Mizzou, and then I went to Tulane Law School down in New Orleans for law school. So that was a fascinating time. It was good to see a different part of the country. I planned on actually coming back after law school, but I was offered a job suing tobacco companies in New Orleans. And so that just seemed like an exciting opportunity. It was around the time that big tobacco was starting to take a lot of hits. Yeah. For years they had bankrupted attorneys. And so I thought, I wanted to be a part of that. So worked for a firm downtown New Orleans for a while, and then moved back. I just felt Columbia is, my hometown, called me back and came back here to Columbia. I started a law firm about 16 years ago, Smith & Parnell, and with my partner, Malia Parnell, my law partner. And we do, criminal defense, we do personal injury, and we do some family law work. It was 2006, so it's been about 14 or 15 years ago. The police in this town were using a lot of excessive force. There's a lot of complaints. There's a lot of problems. A lot of the clients that came into my office for me to represent them had issues about excessive force. Other attorneys were talking about excessive force. It was almost about 1 in 3 clients, criminal defense clients, were talking about issues with law enforcement. So I led the effort. I went to the city council. And there was other groups involved, wasn't just me, but I presented a proposed ordinance for a Citizens Police Review Board. And after 3 years of fighting to get that done, we're ultimately able to achieve that. And so Columbia established a Citizens Police Review Board in 2009. And so the goal is to provide accountability and transparency to law enforcement. And it's been working well. And even there's a city, Florissant, Missouri, in the St. Louis area. They just recently adopted a CPRB and modeled it after the one in Columbia. So I'm glad that that work is spreading, that we can bring accountability and transparency to law enforcement. There's still some work to be done. I mean, the board still has some work to do, and so it's not obviously a perfect system yet, but we're still working on it. In 2017, I was appointed to the Missouri Advisory Committee to the United States Commission on Civil Rights, and the commission advises the President and Congress on civil rights issues. So I've enjoyed doing that and serving in that capacity. And so, I wanted to run for this office. This is something that I've had a passion for. I was surprised that the office came up so soon. It's a special election. Kip Kendrick, who's in the seat before, stepped down just in November. So I thought about it, in a couple of years from now, and I thought, I'd have to make a decision. And so I thought now is a good time to do it. So I threw my hat in the ring, and here we are.
Yeah, it's a special election because the former occupant, Kip Kendrick, who's a wonderful state representative, he left to work for Greg Razor. He became a state senator over on the Kansas City side, so he's his chief of staff. So he's still very involved in policy and everything at the Capitol, so it's kind of getting a 2-for-1 sale, actually, potentially with a special election. So, it's and that special election date, for those of you who everybody should go vote, it will be April 6th. Is that right?
Absolutely, April 6th. Yeah.
Right.
So in about 2 weeks or so.
Yes. Yeah. Go vote. There will be municipal, local elections all over the state too. So go find out what's on your ballot. Go vote. But you'll be on that ballot as well. Because normally for House reps, that's not the correct the time, unless there is some kind of a special election or something else. So it's a unique position for you on the ballot. So I mean, there's a lot of interesting stuff there, and on previous podcasts here, we've talked a lot about police reform, certainly accountability and transparency in government. I wonder, when you were looking at the Citizens Review Board, the civilian oversight for policing, when you were looking at like models to do that, to build that out, what were some guiding ideas or concepts that you saw that you thought were, proven to be particularly effective? And do you see, Florissant, not very far from me right now. It's very heartening to hear that they're using it. I know that some other civilian oversight systems haven't worked so well, mostly because they don't have as much power. So I'm wondering, have you learned anything from that experience? Are there any changes that you would make, that you would foresee making for folks who are interested in doing something locally too?
Well, obviously you want to have the most power you can to hold the police accountable. And the interesting thing about this board is, so the makeup of it, what they did is they put a committee together. I was fortunate enough to be selected to serve on the committee to decide how it operated. But it was a bipartisan committee. Okay. So one person can't come in and make all the rules and say, we're going to do it this way. I wanted the board to, for example, to have subpoena power. It didn't, but it provides a venue. So if something happens, the police will have to go in front of the board if the board chooses to bring them there to answer for situations that need to be addressed. One of the problems I think with law enforcement oftentimes is a lack of transparency, and I felt that just the threat of knowing that if something happens, they're going to have to go in front of a public board, which the press can attend and would if something were to happen, can be a deterrent to police malfeasance and problems. One of the problems here in Columbia was that there really wasn't, so people would complain and they would say, well, this didn't happen. They could just throw it in the trash. So anytime there was an incident, someone would bring it in and say, hey, this happened. And they would say, no, it didn't, and basically throw it away. And so there was no way to bring any type of accountability. I think we looked at, so back in 2006, we got some of the raw data from the police department, and we found, I think it was in the prior 7 years, this was like 2006, 2007, the prior 7 years, anytime someone filed a complaint, if the person was Black, nothing happened. So there was never any resolution if a Black citizen filed a complaint. I think if a white person had filed a complaint, maybe one time in 7 years did they do anything, it was a written reprimand. So I don't care what agency you're a part of, whether you're attorney and a doctor or your doctor, architect, people make mistakes. And so to tell me that in 7 years there was never a need to do anything beyond one written reprimand in a department of that size was ludicrous. And so I think once the public understood what was happening, I think they were on board to get something done. And so because of that, the board was established. So that's something that's, I think the transparency piece is good. One of the difficulties, I think the downside is, you want the board, when the board was structured, I wanted them to be able to audit the department. And there are tools in their toolbox to go in and look at, what the department is doing wrong and to work with them on policy issues. That's something that I haven't seen as much of that I would like, because when the department, once you don't have a lot of excessive force being used, if that issue is taken care of and the officers are, figure, hey, I can't get away with as much as now as I did before, but what are we going to do about policy issues, right? And is the board going to look into what the departments are doing to make changes? And I felt like here, I don't see enough of that. And a lot of it comes down to the personality of the board members. It depends who's there, right? And are people willing to do the hard work? And so, I think you have to get the right people. And there's good people on their survey. I'm not trying to knock them, but I think you really have to be aggressive in that. And I think, city leadership tends to want, more of a friendly relationship between the board and the police department. So they're constantly pushing for, let's all just get along. Let's work together. And yes, you want to work together. However, the board is supposed to be in a supervisory position over the police department, right? To hold them accountable. Right. So it's not supposed to be kind of a kumbaya, let's hold hands and walk down the street. And the city leadership is always pushing for that. And so it really takes an outside voice to make sure the board's on the right track.
Yeah. That's it's interesting, just all the politics around that locally, and there's just a lot of kind of money that flows into all of these things too, especially when you're talking about public safety budgets and there's certainly a need, and unfortunately in so many parts of Missouri right now we're seeing violence increase and all this other stuff, and it's tough, right, in that situation as a local politician to on one hand say, all right, here's what we need to do, and on the other hand accountability. But it just seems like that's something, I've worked with a lot of officers too, and it seems like folks who are doing the right thing or in that job for the right reasons really want that accountability, because then you're not working with somebody who's doing the wrong thing all the time and having to deal with that too.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's we all know there's obviously a lot of good officers who serve and they want the best for their communities. And yeah, they want people to know that they're doing the right thing. One of the good things about even like with police body cams is that, especially as a criminal defense attorney, I watch a lot of those. Mm-hmm. And, there's many officers who are being very respectful. And I think that provides accountability, right? Because they know that whatever happens is going to be recorded. Right. So I think that helps modify police behavior. And, generally, they're going to want to do the right thing because they're on camera. So it's a win-win for everybody, right? Mm-hmm. I don't think anyone wants to operate in secrecy. Obviously, there are some people who do. We know that, but for the people who want to do the right thing, they shouldn't have a problem being transparent.
Right. Yeah. No, that's really important work. I'm glad to hear that's happening, and we certainly need more of that. So I guess obviously your background as an attorney and doing all of this kind of work. Your reputation certainly precedes you when it comes to civil rights issues in Missouri. But I wonder, from your background as an attorney, you would think we would have a whole lot of attorneys writing the laws for the state. We do. Right. Who are in the background, there's staff who are there and everything else. But from the perspective of elected officials, there aren't really that many who are in the legislature right now doing that. So, certainly that's an important perspective to have, at least. Well, I'm a little biased because I'm one too, but one would think that would be an important perspective to have. So I wonder, taking the work that you have done, both in your practice, but also, on these different commissions and the different kind of community work that you've done, mm-hmm. Has that informed, I'm sure it has, but how has that informed kind of the platform that you're running on, the ideas that you want to bring to Jefferson City?
Absolutely. So, well, as far as being an attorney, as a practicing attorney, as a litigator, you're constantly analyzing statutes. I mean, so you know that as an attorney. So you're looking at statutes, seeing how they're going to apply. You have to, address those with the other side and the judge. A lot of the statutes in Missouri are very poorly written, unfortunately. And some of these statutes you're looking at, and you're like, what is this? And, they're just kind of, they kind of add one provision onto another one. And I've had statutes where you almost have to look at two of them and put them together. It's like, what was that movie with Nicolas Cage, National Treasure, where they're looking for a treasure and they have to lay a map on something else. Sometimes you almost feel like you have to do that, to figure out what the statute is attempting to convey. So I would like to push back on a lot of bad statutory writing if I could. If I had the opportunity to be on the Judiciary Committee to deal with some of those issues, because there's a lot of legislation is just poorly written. Or there's such a fine line a lot of times, especially with criminal statutes, between maybe a D felony and an A misdemeanor in a case, or an E felony or an A misdemeanor. So the prosecutor has this wide discretion of whether to charge someone, especially when you're dealing with like assault issues or domestic assault. They almost read it like they're the same statute. And so a prosecutor can charge someone with a felony or misdemeanor, just kind of depending on how they feel like approaching it. So, and that's not really fair to a defendant, because you don't know, one guy's going to get a misdemeanor, another guy's going to get a felony, and it's basically the same facts for the most part. So making sure that the legislation is clear and that it would work in a courtroom and be fair to defendants and everybody, because it's not just, why are you protecting criminals, but it's all of us, right? I mean, you want to make sure that we're protected, and you don't want people, especially the poor, because unfortunately, as you know, we all know this, if you're poor, it's a snowball effect, and the law can just roll on top of you, kind of like a combine, and eat you alive. And so, especially you don't have the representation if people aren't fighting for you. It's interesting, so I'm kind of digressing a little bit. When you talk about, like, for example, prosecutors, when prosecutors run, there's a lot of good prosecutors in Missouri, but, when they run and they want a promotion, if you've ever been to a fundraiser for a prosecutor, what do they say? They talk about the number of convictions that they have. Uh-huh. Well, so we know then, and the role of the prosecutor is supposed to be fair and impartial and to seek justice. But to get a promotion, if they brag about convictions, it's clear they're looking for convictions. And so if you're poor, you don't have good legal representation, or if you don't have a family that got you out of a lot of minor things, you're going to pay the price for that. And so, you want to make sure the laws are fair so they don't unfairly fall on the poor and people of color in this state and in this country.
Right. And that's, right now, you look at Missouri, our public defender system has been severely underfunded for a long time. And obviously, who is that impacting more? And so there's a lot of conversations around these issues now. And usually we get there once everything is in disaster crisis mode.
Sure, absolutely.
So, I wonder, I used to work at the Attorney General's office. And every year we used to put out this report, this vehicle stops report in Missouri. And every year it would show that we pull over black people at a much higher rate in Missouri, that we arrest black drivers at a much higher rate than any other racial group in Missouri, and that the black drivers are also less likely than their white counterparts to actually have contraband on them. And then year after year, this report comes out, and year after year, the statistics show, it's worse. And it gets worse and worse every year, right? It's, I know there's been some discussion about, are we measuring this or measuring that? And I understand, you want more data and then you can figure it out. But at some point, one would think you got enough data to know that there's at least a problem. I wonder, certainly this is kind of in that same realm of who's really getting screwed over in the justice system right now, and if that's how it's not really a functioning justice system if there are so many questions about it, because you need to have that integrity and you need to have that trust within the system. Given where our legislature is right now, we have seen some bipartisan cooperation on some bills even now about police accountability and some of these other things. Yes. We'll see if it gets to the finish line or not. Looking at those, do you see, is there an opportunity that you see that you think maybe hasn't been tried or maybe hasn't been discussed enough, doesn't have like this critical mass push behind it, that you see maybe could be supported by the supermajority Republican legislature right now?
We have a good opportunity right now just because of what happened this summer. After George Floyd was killed, 97% of Americans felt that the killing was unjustified. Whenever in our history do you have 97% of the people on board for any issue? I don't care what
Right.
it is. And so the fact that that many people looked at that and said that shouldn't have happened tells you something about our country and some of the issues that concern a lot of people. Now, now 97. Now that doesn't mean that 97% of Americans agreed with the follow up or how things were handled after that. However, most Americans knew that that was wrong. I really believe there's momentum right now in the Missouri legislature to get things done when you talk about criminal justice reform. Senator Williams,
Hmm.
the state senator, is his bill that he's moving. It's interesting. So it was getting a lot of bipartisan support, and I think it still is. And it seemed like law enforcement was involved and felt like it was a good bill. And this bill, for example, would ban chokeholds in certain situations, bans no-knock warrants. So law enforcement was on board, and it looked like there was some momentum there. Now, there's also issues with bills making it more difficult that have been introduced that make it more difficult to investigate police misconduct. Whereas it's almost a more difficult standard than if you're investigating just a regular citizen's misconduct. So it's kind of the pendulum's kind of swinging slowly back the other way. Um, but I still believe there's momentum, and I think that momentum needs to be seized upon. So now's really the time, Elad. I mean, I think if you wait, well, we'll wait 5 years. You really can't wait 5 years
Yeah.
because I do think it is still fresh. I know it's been almost a year since June when a lot of these things happened. However, it's still fresh in people's minds to some degree, not as much as then. But I think this session or the next one, I think we can get something done on these issues. I'm optimistic. I'm confident. But it's one of those situations where if you wait another 8 years, maybe not. And then hopefully
Hmm.
we don't have a situation where something worse happens. So,
Right.
because one of the problems I foresee is, you see all these things, with Michael Brown and Ferguson, these are not isolated incidents. It's almost like tremors leading up to something bigger. I hope that's not the case. But even the
Right.
level of protesting I've noticed over, between Michael Brown and George Floyd was even bigger and even larger. And so what's going to happen the next time? So hopefully we can get a lid on this because I don't think anyone wants to see, huge mass riots, even on a grander scale. So hopefully
Right.
we can all, pass common sense legislation that will, protect people and make sure that all of our citizens are treated fairly.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. It's because the longer that you ignore these issues and people see that you're ignoring or not doing anything about it, I mean, the
Mhm.
more upset people get because then, I mean, the obvious answer is, well, what's the point of me even interacting with elected officials or my government or trying to go that route? And so when you don't have that avenue anymore, when it's not a legitimate path to fixing the problem, well, then you got to look elsewhere, or you take more drastic steps. And each time that happens, I think you're right. I mean, it gets worse because people just they get fed up with the inaction when reason just like you said. I mean, reasonable people, doesn't really matter what party you're in, they agree something's got to be done, and there are reasonable, at least a few things that we can all agree on. So at least,
Absolutely.
yeah, at least do that. So, and Brian Williams'
Absolutely.
bill is a great example of that. I hope
Absolutely.
you're right. There's some movement now to kind of go the other direction. And I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody's got some reason to be doing something, but yeah, there were some bills that were just heard on that topic very recently. So, let's see. We do have a question here about a specific. Oh, here we go. We got a specific position question. You ready?
Yeah, let's go.
Oh, let's do it. All right, let's go. Let's do it. All right, I'm going to add John. I'm adding you to the broadcast. You're coming on. All right, hi, David. What are your thoughts on the GOP attempts to limit the ballot initiative? So, we just saw, and we have seen quite a few bills that have been proposed, primarily by Republican representatives, and I think some state senators too, that would change the ballot initiative process. So right now, you got to go get signatures out there. Once you get enough signatures, then you can get this thing on the ballot. There's also the language that the ballot has, how that's approved, everything else. There's some costs associated with it. So right now, there are a few House bills that would tweak, one, how much money you would have to pay before you can go and start collecting signatures and get this thing on the ballot. There are several that would change where you have to collect signatures from. Right now, you have to qualify, I think it's 6 out of the 8 congressional districts. Some are like, oh no, get them at all of them. Some are, hey, you got to get way more votes here, or way more signatures and all over the place from the state, which would obviously make it much, much harder to get anything on the ballot. And then there's another that would also, or another set of them that would also change how the percentage of the vote that you would need in order to pass a ballot initiative that's presented by signature versus presented by the legislature, because the legislature can also propose their own things for the ballot too. And so there are some, I believe that they're proposing that the legislature, if they decide that we all need to vote on amending the Constitution, majority vote is still the way to go. But if we, the people, say, hey, we think we need to amend the Constitution, then it would be a 2/3 vote instead, which would be another barrier, because obviously our representatives know better than us. So, what are your thoughts? I mean, I might be missing a few because I know there's a whole bunch flying out there, but do you have any thoughts on where you stand on any of those issues?
Yeah, absolutely. And, this is part of a larger problem. But yeah, there's definitely an assault on the initiative petitions. And as you mentioned, one of the bills is going to require at least 10% of all registered voters to sign a petition, which I believe it was 8% before in certain areas. So that's a problem. And the majority is trying to take away the will of the people. And we need to push back against that type of legislation. So this assault on the ballot initiative process needs to be stopped. For example, you talk about Medicaid expansion. Well, that was voted on by the voters, right, through ballot initiative process. And right after that, we see this assault on the process to stop it. As you mentioned, one bill is going to require 2/3 to pass an amendment, which is a lot. And so this is just an assault on the citizens. It's an assault on voter rights, and we need to push back against this. So I am not in favor of the majority's attempt to undermine the ballot initiative process, just because they're basically trying to undermine the will of the people. I mean, they're probably still mad about Medicaid expansion. And so we need to get a handle on this. But this also goes to a larger issue, and it's really the assault on voting rights. That's one of the things that I would like to fight against. I mean, Missouri is 3rd in the nation on voter suppression bills. Okay. There's just a huge amount of bills that are cascading down regarding voter suppression. House Bill 334 requiring photo IDs. I mean, every layer they can add, the majority can add to keep someone from voting, brings down the amount of people that can vote. And the majority knows, I mean, it used to be more so, but they know they can't win if everybody votes. The majority does not want everyone to vote, period. They just don't. And so all these voter suppression bills cloaked in voter fraud, it's a red herring. I mean, we don't have widespread voter fraud to overturn an election, right? It's just not happening. It's not true. These bills are designed to keep people from voting. And in many instances, this even amounts to what would be a poll tax. I mean, for example, if you say, well, I need a photo ID, well, you take someone who's really poor or they're disabled, they have to go purchase that, right? Their DMV is not giving away those for free. And so the Missouri legislature, the majority doesn't want to pay for those. So now you're paying for the right to vote, to go vote. So we need to fight and push back against these bills, these voter suppression bills. But definitely, going back specifically to the question about the ballot initiative, we need to push back against that because it's bad legislation to make it difficult for the voters to have their say. Yeah.
It's a lot. I mean, Medicaid expansion, great example. That one just passed. That was a constitutional heck. And the problem is, so there are a couple different ways, and you'll see this on the ballot. You'll see a proposition, you'll see an amendment, and there's a big difference between the two. An amendment is amending the state constitution. The proposition is basically us proposing a law. And the amendment, you'd like to amend your constitution, maybe not all the time, right? Because it's a little harder to maneuver that. You maybe start a new program, and then it's a little harder to change things as you're going along. And that's the problem. And the benefit of doing it as a law is that, oh, well, if something didn't work out too well, then you can go ahead and change the law. And that's what the legislators are there to do. But in Missouri, we have a pretty significant problem with if we pass it as a proposition, then they might just throw out the whole thing. One great example, and this is what I was thinking about when you said Medicaid expansion we passed as an amendment. So to some degree that has to happen. Now there's a conversation about that. But the minimum wage increase was passed overwhelmingly as a proposition. And that means it's a law, and legislators can change the law. So right now they're trying to throw out the minimum wage increase, or at least move it, farther into the future so that folks are taking longer before they get any of that. And and the reason that the minimum wage was even put on the ballot in the first place was because the legislature was saying, "Oh, you local municipalities, you can't make these decisions. Only we can." And so then the people said, "No, we disagree with you. Do this." And they now are disagreeing with us again. And it's such a mess. And Medicaid expansion, another great example. Like even when we passed an amendment, it seems like on the periphery, there's things that the legislature will then say, oh, well, maybe we won't fund it. Or, oh, well, maybe we'll add like some other amendment to it that will change that. And it's just like all over the place. I wonder, because this is a question I get a whole lot from folks who are looking at this whole thing and they're just like, well, what? I mean, I collected all those signatures. I did all this work. I worked on this campaign and everything else. What do you think that there's any, other than like, obviously voting for people who are going to listen to their constituents and hopefully take that into account when they're making decisions. Do you think that there's anything that we can do from the perspective of the system itself that would prevent these things from just being changed shortly after they're voted on by the people?
Hopefully legislators would have a conscience, I would think.
That would be nice.
Yeah, the level of aggressiveness we see in the Missouri legislature is something that I haven't seen in a long time. Like you talk about Medicaid expansion, how the voters just decided this, but now, they're putting Medicaid expansions, in an appropriations bill separately, presumably to kill it, right? They're not putting it in with the normal Medicaid law, so where it can be funded properly. So that's a problem. And so, I think, people maybe need to contact their legislators and say, hey, look, this is not what we wanted. When you have an overwhelmingly amount of people in Missouri say this is what we want, and then the majority said we're just not going to fund it. And it looked like it was going to get funded earlier on. The governor didn't look like he was going to make, substantial cuts. But now as we kind of march on, we kind of pass the halfway mark down in Jeff City, it looks like it may not be smooth sailing after all. So I think people just need to contact their legislators and let them know that this is not okay. I would think it would be risky to do that, right? Yeah. If the voters wanted this and you turn around and try to underfund it. And I think people need to be aware of what's happening, right? So when you talk about the lack of funding of Medicaid expansion, voters, they've got jobs, they're doing their own thing, people sign petitions, they're not thinking about what's happening on a day-to-day basis. Some people are very involved, but some people, they vote and they kind of go on about their business, and they don't know the subtleties of what's happening behind it, right? They don't know that, hey, they're going to underfund this, or they may try to kill it. And so I think just letting people know, hey, this is what's happening, is an important thing to do so the voters can get involved.
Right. Yeah, I, on that note, did get a question. Your feeling about town halls as a potential state representative?
Like attending town halls or going to town halls, I guess?
Or having them, yeah. It seems like hosting them, it looks like. Because people, for folks in your district who would like to know what you're doing, because I know that there are some elected officials who aren't big fans of hosting their own town halls.
I think they're good ideas. The more communication, the better. One of the criticisms I think a lot of people have with politicians, and criticism that I've had about politicians in general, is you don't really. First of all, you never see them until they run, right? A lot of times you don't know them. So you have somebody running in your district. It's like, who is this guy? Or gal or woman? Where's this person been? And they just show up and then they run, and then when they get elected, they kind of disappear again until election time. And that's always bothered me, just as a citizen in general, is that I just don't know where this person has been. So yeah, why not? I think people need to know what's going on. I think it'd be a good forum for the legislator as well to communicate why they did something, especially if they're being criticized. They can explain, hey, I had to do this, but here's the reason behind it. So I think that's a great idea. There's a a city council person here that would always have not really a town hall, but he just always have like coffee shop hours. And I said that was a great idea. He was always there every Saturday, between these hours, and anyone could just come and sit with him. So I want to maintain that spirit of communication, because it's very easy to just kind of forget the people you're representing.
Right. And that's an important thing not to do. Well, on that note, if you do want to get a hold of you, you've got a website out there. It's just your name. It's David Tyson Smith. So you can go to there.com and you'll be able to get a hold of your campaign, see what everything's, what's going on with you. So I guess from your, so you've got this election on April 6th, and right, it's you and one other candidate. It's a Libertarian candidate. Is that right?
That's correct. That's correct. I have an opponent. He's a Libertarian. I do not have a Republican opponent.
Gotcha. Okay. So they didn't put somebody, I'm assuming they just didn't put somebody up, right? Because they would nominate.
Right.
The way that, so tell us, I guess, a little bit, because it's a little different for you getting to the special election. How were you selected to be the candidate? Because it's a little bit different for folks who might not be as familiar.
It sure is, and it's interesting because even, people within the process, we were all kind of wondering how this was going to work. So what happened was the Democrat, every party has a committee, right? So you've got the Democratic Central Committee, the Republicans have a committee. The Central Committee, the Democratic Central Committee was going to choose a Democratic nominee. And that's the way it was going to happen. However, I had two other opponents in that process. So we basically had our own, our own primary to some degree. Now, the Central Committee was going to vote, and their votes are weighted based on, I guess, how many people are in their ward. So what happened was we had multiple, right after I announced, we had a forum, a panel, if you will, with the two other candidates, and then we went on to be interviewed by the Central Committee. So the Central Committee interviewed all of us separately, and then we had several other forums. There's a Mule Skinners forum where we both appeared, kind of like a debate, talked about our ideas, and then after that, yeah, absolutely. And so then the governor, and so then they voted. The interesting thing about this is we didn't know. So when Kip steps down in November, we didn't know when the governor was going to call a special election. So Kip steps down in November. There's a vacancy. I announced that I'm going to run. There's two other candidates that were going to run, but we didn't know when the special election was going to be. So I didn't know it was going to be in April. We didn't know if it was going to be. Some people said he's not going to do it. It's going to be in 2 years. So I was in this weird limbo. We all were in this weird limbo, just kind of waiting. And so it's difficult to, and I think the rules state by statute, the Central Committee can't really begin their work until the governor calls a special election. So I contacted them and said, hey, I'm interested. And so I think what they said, well, give us information about yourself, a bio, who's endorsing you. But they really couldn't start moving on it until we get the special election call. And it was interesting for me personally because I had a trip planned. I was going to go to Florida for a few days, just four days or something. We're going to have a long weekend. And I'm leaving on Thursday, and on Wednesday afternoon, like late afternoon, 2 or 3, the news comes down that the governor has called a special election for April. So now I'm like, okay. So I remember going to Florida and the news calling and wanting an interview. So I'm in a hotel conference room doing this interview on my cell phone because I just didn't expect that, right? And rushing around to find, I kind of had beachwear down there, so I'm rushing around to these stores to try to find, button-up shirts just because I didn't anticipate he would do it right then. No one knew. And so it kind of started when I was on my trip. And so I'm down there, and I reached out to some people before, but now I'm calling different legislators and, I'm driving around doing that. So it was all very sudden. And then by January, the committee had decided, and they voted, and so they picked me as their nominee. And so there will be a general election, but as far as the nomination process, that's how that went. So we interviewed, we had a few forum panels, and then they voted. Yeah. So what have you been, I guess, campaigning now? We've been at this pandemic for a year. What does it look like? Like, what do you do? How do you talk to people? Are you going door to door? Are you doing phone call? Like, what is the primary, I guess,
action that you're doing to reach out
Right,
to
right,
folks
right.
right now?
So what we do, there's a lot of forums. Okay, I think I have a forum or speaking engagement scheduled. I think just about every day almost until next week, maybe one day off. But so there's a lot of speaking. Last night I was speaking, which is great. I love connecting with people.
Yeah.
So there's that. We have volunteers, people who sign up to volunteer. We do a lot of lit drops. So we try not to knock on doors because of COVID. So there's a lot of volunteers that show up, and we have so many houses where we're trying to distribute literature to. And so every weekend they're going out and distributing literature. So I typically, I'm excited to meet people. So we had everyone come to the Democratic headquarters, on the weekend. And, my volunteer coordinator, she's great, Sarah Catlin, she said, hey, can I borrow you for 45 minutes when we first started doing this? I said, well, wait a minute, I want to be there the whole time, right? I want to meet people that come out. So we have a table set up, people show up, we'll give them literature, or they want signs, and they'll go out and they'll distribute signs to people who want signs, or they'll distribute literature. So we have packs, and people can do it at their leisure. So they might get a stack of like 25 cards to give out, and we just put them on doors. And we have the software, they can just go and do it. They don't have to do it right then. They can do it over the next few days, whatever's convenient. So it's a lot of that. So we don't do a lot of knocking on doors. It's volunteers handing out literature, and then I speak to a lot of people. And then what I like to do, is for example, I'm the other day I was driving. I was on my lunch break, and I was driving somewhere, and I saw my sign in someone's yard, and I didn't know the person, and I saw there was like several people out in front. So I just pulled my car over, and I put my mask on, and I just walked up to him. I stayed about 8 feet back and said, "Hey, I just want to thank you for putting my sign in your yard. I appreciate it." Yeah, and so they asked me some questions, and so I do things like that. So without going to doors, if I see people out, I'll talk to them. And especially with practicing law, so I can kind of mix the two. So I had court in Cooper County, which is Boonville, and I'm driving there, and I hear on the radio that they're doing a mass vaccination at the casino, which is like a couple blocks away. So I go to court, I drive over there, get out, talk to the National Guard that was there, took a photo, and then post and say, "Hey, look, they're doing a mass vaccination. Here's how to sign up."
Yeah.
And everything. So it's kind of two birds with one stone. I'm going to court, and I'm getting this out there, and people are interested in that. So there's a lot of that. So, coordinating with volunteers this Saturday, the Mizzou Democrats wanted to do something. They're great. I mean, they're very active. So I met on campus with them, and they came out, and they took tons of literature out and distributed it. So it's just talking to people, listening to people, which I enjoy. I'm better for it, right? I mean, so as we talk, I listen. So I every time I talk with someone or go on a panel, I come back stronger just because I learn something every time.
Yeah, that's really great. There was a time it wasn't as I should have thought about the yards, but I saw somebody with my bumper sticker once. And I started chasing. I was like on foot, and I started chasing them down. It's like, "We've got my bumpers," and the lady's just like, and just windows up and everything, and drives off. Found me on Facebook later because I posted something about it. Thank goodness. And they're like, "Oh yeah, that was me. I was really busy. I had to get to work." It's like, oh good. I hope I didn't creep you out too much. So that's a good
absolutely.
One. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Oh, look at this. Okay, wait, hold up. So we've got Sarah, who you already gave a shout out, volunteer coordinator. She's watching. She's famous. Yes, she is. Everybody knows Sarah. She's wonderful. Yes.
Absolutely. She's great. She's great.
Yeah. Well, it looks
she's so enthusiastic.
Oh my goodness.
People love Sarah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, get her to do everything. It's fantastic. And it looks like Allison is also very excited because she's seeing lots of signs in her neighborhood in Columbia for you. So
yeah.
That's a good place. You should find Allison's. Hey, Allison, message David so he can come and start, talking to random people in yards that he doesn't know.
Absolutely. Well, you wonder if you're being creepy or not when you stop and talk to people, and I try to have some type of literature so they know,
right.
You're just not some random guy walking up, of course, but
right.
It's been exciting, and the momentum's been great, and people are coming up, and you're just kind of surprised that people really want to help as much as they do, and I've been taken aback, like, no, so Sarah organized a volunteer event, and I showed up on a Saturday, and just, the line of people, and granted they were social distanced, but they were still, it was out in the grass all the way to the parking lot. And, I was just taken aback, and I'm humbled by that people would come out and want to do it on a Saturday morning, right? They'd want to do that. And so it's just exciting, and it's touching to see that people want to to get involved. And I really want this to be about. And people will message me and say, "Hey, thank you." And I'm saying, "Hey, this is about all of us. This is about. It's not about me. It's about us. It's about what we can do."
Yeah.
And so I'm excited that hopefully there'll be kind of a bridge between politicians that, like I said, people who usually don't know, and someone that is actually involved in the community. And Kip was great about it too. I mean, people knew and liked Kip. He was wonderful. But just generally speaking, there's a lot of times there's a disconnect, right? With politicians and the people.
Right. Well, now this is a great segue into another question, because we got a long comment from Roy, so I'll put that up on the screen. We were talking about the ballot initiative issues and the legislature kind of changing things up and down, whenever we pass something. And he brings up a lot of examples. For example, puppy mills, that was something that was passed as a proposition. Right to work was something that we had to then go and get reversed. And now there's a bunch of bills trying to put right to work back on, even though we just voted against it. Concealed carry, he talked about too, as another example. And then at the end, he says, many of us are tired of even trying to do a proposition. I got a question via text. And I think it's about being tired in general, and it's something that I think a lot of people are feeling. And I wonder how you would answer this, because I think you probably have a good one. But the question was, how do we get people activated to get to the polls and take back our government? And you talk so much about community orientation and involvement and all of this stuff that's going on out there. But it seems like, you're really personable. You're trying to do this the right way, and you're going and saying, and you're really focused on building that community. So I wonder, how do you got someone who's a little dejected out there here at Missouri. How do you answer that? How do you get folks energized, and how do we get them out and voting and making sure their voices are being heard?
It comes down to hope. It comes down to hope. And, as I've talked to people in the district and other places, people are dejected. And there's a sense, especially with Missouri turning so red, there's this sense of hopelessness. But I believe that a new day is coming. And I believe that I'm optimistic. Otherwise, I wouldn't have done this, right? It's easier for me not to have done this, but to have done it. As you know, you're involved in politics. And, but just like the messages I receive from people, even high school. There's high school people that just show up. I want to be involved. What can I do? Or a message, hey, you've inspired me. You've inspired other kids. You've inspired so many people. People say, keep going. And I get texts from even out of state from people I know, hey, keep it going. We're excited. And I believe that we can do great things. I believe that Missouri is not a lost cause. I don't believe that everyone is this far-right Trumpite, right? I think there's this idea that when you see that red state, you think, oh, everyone over here is on the far right. And that's not true. I think we have a lot more in common. I think that we can win again in this state. I think we can win statewide in this state. And I think it's just about doing the work. And I don't think it's 15 years away, right? It's not 15 years away. It's not 20 years away. It's a lot closer than that. And I think if we're optimistic and we believe, was it Nelson Mandela who said, some things seem like they're impossible until they're done. And we can do this, right? A new way is coming. One of the things, especially talking with people, I've had a lot of people that I had someone endorse me. They said that, I noticed they were posting a lot of Trump things on their website, but I knew this person was an attorney, and I called them. I said, you know what? Would you endorse, just because I knew the person's character, I said, would you endorse me? And I said, I know you post all these Trump. They say, yeah, I know you. I will. I'm not like that. And there's this idea that when someone posts something about Trump, you're like, oh, you're this far right conspiracy theory believer person way out here on the fringe. And you have this idea that everybody's like that.
Yeah.
Who's on the right. And that's not the way it is. There's a lot of people in the middle right who will vote Democrat. Democrats who've left the party, that we can get them back. And so it's about believing. One of the interesting things when I think about believing and hope is just something I noticed over the past few years. I don't know, Elad, if you're a sports fan or not, but I love basketball. I love college basketball. I run a little pool every year. But one of the things I thought about was how, with Michael Porter Jr., he plays with the Denver Nuggets, right? I'm familiar with him. Well, when he came to Mizzou, we weren't having a great season. He decides to come. So what happens? All the fans buy season tickets, myself included. Players transfer to come, right? Tillman, who's from Illinois, came. His brother reclassified to come. And I remember going to one of the first games, and someone posted, a friend of mine, Jason Thornhill posted, he said, hey, and he posted a picture out his window. It's like the old times of Mizzou basketball. I mean, the traffic jams getting to the arena. It was beautiful, right? And so we played a good team. Iowa State, they were good at that time, and we beat them. But the interesting thing about all of that was, Michael Porter Jr. got hurt. He's a great athlete, but he got hurt. He didn't really play. And he played maybe 2 minutes the whole year. But nobody really knew when he was coming back, so the fans kept coming. We ended up having a winning season, went to the NCAA tournament. He never really contributed. But the idea was the hope, right? It had nothing to do with him. It just had to do with people believing. People believed we were going to be good, and so they came. So all of that could have happened without him. The fans still could have bought season tickets. Players could have come here, and we would have still won. But sometimes you need that hope, and you need people to believe. And we've had good days in this state. We've had good days in the country. And so I believe good things. I wouldn't be doing this if I wasn't optimistic. And I'm encouraged. And just, when I announced my candidacy, within days, I think the Legislative Black Caucus had called on the governor to call a special election, which I didn't know that. And I called some members there who I had known previously, and they said, we've heard about you. And so there's just been the exuberance, not only within the caucus, but outside. And people are coming, legislators come. I mean, I was thinking about running. I hadn't even made a decision. And Martha Stevens, who's another rep, called me. I'm driving back from Walmart. I see her calling me on my screen on my car. I'm like, yeah. She says, David, I'm endorsing you. And I hadn't even announced. So there's been this enthusiasm around this, and I believe that that's contagious. I had a friend from law school in Tulane who was generally a Republican, who I've known, but he knows my character. When I went to a book signing, John McCain, years ago, I was kind of starstruck just because he was a U.S. senator and kind of a moderate. And came around, so I had him sign a book, but I gave it to my friend who's Republican, and he's a great guy, but when he heard I was running, he organized, a fundraising thing for other people at the school for me. This is a guy who would, vote Republican, but he knew my character. And so I believe that a new day is coming. And I don't think we're facing, it's all the Capitol rioters. I think that's sometimes the view we have, is that that's who we have to convince. I mean, you're not going to convince people way out on the margins, but we don't need everyone way out on the far, far right. So I'm optimistic about the future.
Love it. Yeah, I mean, it's just sometimes you just need that spark, right? That really lets you see what it could be. And I've been on many different teams. I'm not that great of a player at anything, but losing ones and then seeing that transform all of a sudden, and not because anything like major change, but it was the details, right? And I think this is great because I think the more outreach that folks are doing, the more ownership that people can have over what all of this becomes. And it's those personal relationships that really get you past so many things. I mean, I can't tell you how many Republicans I've talked to in the state who were willing to change their mind if the information, we just have to do a better job of getting that information out to people, right? Giving folks a reason and showing, I think just showing people what it could be, and making sure that we're including all of those folks in that conversation. So, no, it's really great.
Absolutely.
And I will tell you, as somebody who's not in your district, and I know a lot of the folks in the legislature right now, a lot of us are very excited, and especially with the work that you've done before, to have somebody of, who has committed your life to the things that you have done, to have the opportunity to have you representing people in the state is something that's really great. And so I'm very excited. Was very excited that you said yes to come on. So I gave you another forum to do this week.
Absolutely. Oh, I was excited about it. Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. And thank you for your service and what the work you've done, both running and what you're doing now. So you're definitely an asset. So I'm excited about you as well.
Well, I appreciate it. Well, we'll have you on anytime because you say such nice things, so I might as well do it. It will be a highlight of my week, so we'll have to get you on more.
Right.
But I want to give you a chance. We're getting towards the end here. Obviously, the website is, hold up, let me get it on the screen, do my fancy thing, davidtysonsmith.com, so folks can go and get involved and help you out and learn more about your platform points. But I want to give you got a few minutes here, so I want to give you a few minutes to, let folks know what are what is the reason that folks should support you, should vote for you, should go out on April 6th and cast a ballot for David Tyson Smith?
Absolutely. Well, I'm optimistic about the future, but we're really in a state of crisis in Missouri. And as we touched on before, we're third in the nation as far as voter suppression bills. We have to act now. We have to push back on this bad legislation. Medicaid expansion, we need to make sure it's properly funded. The voters voted on Medicaid expansion, and it looks like the majority might try to kill it. So we have to fight that issue. I grew up in public schools. Missouri ranks 46th in the country regarding the amount spent for kids K through 12. Mm-hmm. So we need to make sure that public schools are taken care of. There's bills that are just, that are aimed at primarily, they favor charter schools. I mean, that's what they do. And so that takes money out of public schools, which we can't afford. We can't afford that. And the students here in Missouri need to make sure that the public schools are operating efficiently, because it's really the only way that a lot of people have a way out. And criminal justice reform, there's a good bill that's moving through now, Senator Brian Williams. We need to get behind that. So we really are at a time when it's time for engagement. We cannot be passive. If we're passive, we're going to lose. And so we need to be strong. We need to push back on bad legislation. And I think we can do great things in Missouri if we're all involved and we're all active and engaged. So thank you for having me on. It's been an honor.
Oh, absolutely. No, thanks for coming on. And all very important issues. That education issue is just so crazy to see how much we have defunded public education in this state and then made up all these excuses to try to throw the whole darn thing out. And it's sad to see. So that's a very important issue, and I'm glad that you brought that up too. So you can go to the website, and you've got issues listed on your website too, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Issues, platform, you can see it all there.
Yeah, you got quite a bit. I mean, it's good. Like, you got it's not like something you just go to and there's 3 points and that's it. I mean, you can go down the list of the highlights, the priorities, all of these things. So thank you so much for doing that. I think, being open about those issues is so important. So go to his website, David Tyson Smith. April 6th is Election Day, so make sure to get out there and vote. Wherever you are in Missouri, too, you'll probably have municipal elections, so that's the date you want to go. David, thanks for coming on the pod. I appreciate your time,
Absolutely.
Man. Good luck.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. It's been
Absolutely. And before I let you go, because I love to talk to the guest afterwards, so just so you know, we have our own after show at some point. So you all aren't invited to that. Maybe one day. We'll see what we could do. But there is an important deadline coming up, and I just want to let you all know before I head out of here. There's an important deadline this week. We had a podcast, a special one, yesterday, so you can go check that out. It's on the podcast right now. It's on the videos. You go to the YouTube channel, or if you go to eladgross.live. So let me hold up, David Tyson Smith right here. But if you go to eladgross.live right now, you will see a blue button that will take you to go give a public comment to the Department of Natural Resources on a very important issue. There's a regulation about how we're going to be defining groundwater in Missouri, and whether we're going to include the term perched water in the definition of groundwater. The reason that we're even talking about this right now is because there is a confined animal feeding operation that wants to open up in Livingston County, and really these things want to open up all over the state in areas that they probably shouldn't be in. So this is a question about how we're protecting our water sources, our environment, conservation issues. All of these different issues are really kind of central here. And we had a wonderful show on yesterday. So if you can, go check it out. I had Tim Gibbons from the Missouri Rural Crisis Center on. We talked about all of these issues. If you go to the Facebook page, you can also see just a really short way about how to give public comment. But it's really important, if you can, hit the blue button, go to eladgross.live, hit the blue button, and you will then be able to provide your own public comment and, tell them what you think. So hope you take advantage. Hope you go do that. Until next time, folks, this is the Elad Pod, and very excited to have our next guest. We'll figure out who that is. Taking off this Saturday, so we might do a replay here. It's Passover, folks. Come on, we gotta celebrate getting out of that thing. So, all right, folks. I will see you all later, and until next time, go take a look at eladgross.live, provide some public comment, get involved in government, and we